The liberty of abode and travel. Section 6 of the Bill of Rights says that the liberty of abode and of changing the same within the limits prescribed by law shall not be impaired except upon lawful order of the court. Neither shall the right to travel be impaired except in the interest of national security, public safety, or public health, or as may be provided by law. So you have the general notion here that you have the right or liberty of abode and of travel, but they are, of course, not absolute. They are subject to certain exceptions. According to jurisprudence, Yap versus CA, this is that the right to change abode and travel within the Philippines is always not absolute. Like the other rights in the Bill of Rights, there are restrictions. Most commonly, these restrictions are by court, but in the provision of law, it mentions of specific limits for either of the said rights. So specifically, for the right or liberty to change your abode, your restriction is the lawful order of the court and the law, of course. And then for travel within the country and abroad, you have the lawful order of the court. And of course, if the curtailment is by administrative officers in the interest of national security, public health, and at that which is provided by law, by their implementation of their offices. So first is the liberty of abode, the right to choose and change one's abode is a constitutional right. They are, however, there are, however, limitations to these rights. Foremost is on for foreigners. Foreigners may be restricted in the duration or length of their stay in the Philippines because of passport or visa restrictions. So that's it, no? They have to make specific arrangements or extensions with our Bureau of Immigration before they are allowed a longer stay in the Philippines. There's also a restriction on their intent to work here in the Philippines. These are also regulated by the state. Forced evacuations, for example, while you have the right to stay in your homes, law may require you to evacuate your premises because of disasters or emergencies. This is RA 10121 of 2010, which implements a forced or preemptive evacuation of local residents if necessary for disaster prevention or mitigation. A restriction to your property ownership also, and also for the homeowner to gain exit and entry access to your home is the right of way provision under the new civil code. And of course, you cannot just build your home anywhere. When you want to establish your residence, you might want to rent a premises or a house or a building. Or if you want to own your home, you have to have title, because a land title is the indivisible proof of your land ownership. How about travel within the country and abroad? Also not absolute, but there are also statutory and constitutional restrictions, and as well as inherent limitations which regulate your right to travel. Most recently, we had our restriction of right to travel when we were subject of restrictions of our travel outside of the country, outbound travel. Also, travel of our kababayans and tourists in the Philippines was also restricted. Inbound travel, especially from places where COVID has been prevalent. Also, within the country, people were restricted from going out of their houses. We had to have quarantine passes. No? Other statutory, there's some statutory limitations. You have the Anti-Terrorism Act, which restricts the right to travel of an individual charged with the crime of terrorism. The Philippine Passport Act, where the regulation of the passport is made by the state, which can refuse to issue or reissue or restrict the use or withdraw the validity of a passport to citizens for a cause. You have the Anti-Trafficking of Persons Act, where the state has the right to offload passengers who are maybe possible victims of trafficking of persons, of human beings, no, in our ports. You have the Migrant Workers and Overseas Filipinos Act, where the state may refuse the deployment of our OFWs, especially in areas which are war-stricken or has security issues. You have the VAUC Act, which restrict movement of an individual against whom the protection is intended. The permanent protection order, the temporary protection order, the barangay protection order, and the likes. No? You have the Inter-Country Adoption Act, which may prevent, which may issue rules of restrictions for travel of an adoptee. There are several other laws. No, there are several other laws. One is the penalty of destierro, for example, by the order of the court. A person may be prohibited from travel by reason of destierro, no? Or when you are required by your probation officer to report to him, where he may deny also your request for travel outside of the area of the court's jurisdiction. Or okay, this is case of Marcos versus Manglapos, where you have to clarify where the right to travel comes from. You have the constitutional right to travel, which allows for travel within the country and outside, but the right to travel back to the country may also have its basis in international law, which is recognized in our country because this international law is part of the generally accepted principles of international law. The case of Silverio versus CA reminds us that of court orders restricting travel of persons who are facing criminal charges, because once persons are charged in court and they are allowed to leave the country, the court may lose its jurisdiction over the person or may not enforce some of its processes to the person. But in the case of Coangco versus Sandigan Bayan, Coangco was allowed travel because of his investments and economic interests that may affect the country if he loses opportunities because of his restricted travel. I cannot comment on that further, but you read the case. The case of leave division versus use dens. A public servant who is in charge of crucial information or data, like for example, a court interpreter, may be given more restriction on the right to travel, because the exercise of one's right to travel or the freedom to move from one place to another is assured by the Constitution, but is not absolute. Because if, for example, if you are a court interpreter, if you are a court stenographer, and you are the only person who can decipher court records or court stenographic notes, then it may hamper the outcome of the case, because courts also have deadlines in the resolution of its cases, wherein the judge may rely on transcript of stenographic notes that you have to interpret. Also, for party litigants who may want to bring their cases to appeal, no? They cannot appeal if they do not receive their their transcript of stenographic notes, because they may base their appeal based on the court proceedings. Means of travel, while you have the right to travel, there is no guarantee that you can choose the means of travel. Like for certain freeways or toll gates, there may be restrictions of certain vehicles from entry or use of freeways, expressways. but you cannot invoke your right to travel because while you may travel from point A to point B, you have no right to demand the right to make use of specific means of travel. If motorcycles are prohibited from using expressways, then so be it. You can ride the bus and your right to travel is not hampered. So, means of travel. Remember that the use of the road as a driver is not a right but a privilege. That's why you have your license. That's why for the operation of motor vehicles, there are strict guidelines that every um, every motorist or passenger has to follow. No? So I hope this recording helps.